Law, a series of podcasts focused on insights and learning pertaining to the implementation and use of AI in legal practice, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull & Hull LLP, brought to you by Counsel.ai.
Hi, and welcome to our podcast, A Better Place to Be, AI and the Law. I'm your co-host, Ian Hull from downtown Toronto, here with my co-host, Suzana Popovic-Montag.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Suzana. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again under these circumstances.
That's right. Nice to be back in the podcast chair. We have such busy, crazy professional and personal lives that sometimes it's nice just to be able to sit in a comfy chair and talk about things that matter to us.
Absolutely.
So, staying focused on what matters to us. You've talked about in the past the importance of law. One of the foundational changes that AI brings to law and to lawyers is that it got rid of the blank page.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can tell me a little bit about what I'm getting at there, and then we're going to talk about a podcast that really develops this well.
Yeah. I mean, that blank page is something that can be quite paralyzing for young lawyers and even older lawyers and more experienced practitioners as well. It's that idea that you just don't know where to start. And you have a concept, you have a legal argument, you have a factum to prepare, and you're overwhelmed with everything else that's going on in life, and you don't know where to start. And with the use of AI in the right circumstances and under the right prompts and in a measured fashion, you can get that very first draft of so many things. So it's not just that rote kind of work, that what we used to call grunt work, that AI can assist with. It can really assist with higher level things. But as we're going to talk about in this article that you're going to mention, you've got to do it in the right fashion.
Well, it's so right. And I'm always amazed that in Ontario here, our not the complete run of judges, but our judiciary is being, I think, arguably pretty slow about bringing in the use of AI, and this alertness to hallucinations has started to paralyze, I think, the judicial system in so many ways, and maybe for good reasons. Of course, they're counting on us as officers of the court to come to them. As a lawyer, you present to the court, you present an argument that is rational and it is supported. And judges now think maybe there's a possibility that AI is going to affect the quality of that support. And so they're quite cautious about it. But, it just seems to me with backlog and pressures on judges and so on, boy, getting rid of that blank page, having a first crack at even a breakdown of the facts and so on it's just an obvious transition. But I know it's a complicated issue, and we're going to talk about that as we go along. But our favorite podcast right now is AI and the Future of Law with Jen Leonard and Bridget McCormick, and they have actually had there's one episode where they interview one of the leading judges in LA talking about how they're bringing in AI into the judiciary. But that's a bit of a rabbit hole. I want to really bring us back to one that came out, and it was in April of this year, the April 21st episode of AI and the Future of Law. It was a really fantastic interview, and it was an interview with Daniel Schwarcz. And Daniel Schwarcz is a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. And maybe we can talk a little bit about what came out of that, because I recommend listening to it directly, but it's also kind of fun to talk about what came out of it and how we're employing it in our practice area, and how we're developing our own AI methodologies from people like Professor Schwarcz.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see it's a profession. Lawyers tend to be mistrusting of technology, right? Or not adapting it or adopting it as quickly as we perhaps ought to. And that's just the way we're trained. We're trained to question, we're trained to hypothesize, we're trained to think of every possibility of something going wrong. And I can sort of understand the psyche, and particularly when it gets up to the judicial level, just because of the fact that, their reputations, just like ours, are on the at play. Because if they're relying on counsel has misrepresented something, they make a decision, then on appeal, they're going to get embarrassed, as well, of course, the lawyers. But, I think, as you say, the efficiencies are at some point going to become the turning point for people. And it's not a matter about being lazy. It's not a matter about doing more. It's just about doing it better. And I think that's the real key. And that's why I thought this article, it was called, or the podcast itself was called, Can AI Make Lawyers Better? Daniel Schwarcz on AI and Human Legal Reasoning. And I thought it was really good because it sort of played to all of my concerns and my thoughts and the way I sort of worry about how we adopt AI in our firm. And so, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit of an overview of the podcast.
Sure. And I think really what came out of this was he started with, and I love the way Bridget and Jen do this. They do an aha moment, and they always have part of their podcast is always, what is an aha moment of the week or the whatever the podcast comes out. And they asked Daniel that question, and he said, one of my aha moments is that where we as lawyers are maybe forgetting the benefits of AI is that AI is really a natural extension of our legal training, and prompting, exploring, considering, identifying ambiguity, asking follow-up questions, testing hypotheticals, and probing for precision and counter arguments. That's what we do for a living, whether we're on the solicitor side or the happy side, where we're helping clients in a non-contentious area, of the law, or as a litigator. And it was really fascinating because, I was at a seminar the other day, and there was a bit of negativity about AI and professions. And everyone comes to the hallucination piece. And I sort of said, yeah, but if AI is going to enhance our abilities and work and actually just make us better at what we're trained to do, then is that worth reconsidering? And I really do believe that. And I think Professor Schwarcz really, pulled that off the page. He says that, AI reasoning, and particularly adversarial reasoning, it cultivates these skills, and this is what we're trained to do.
And I think for me, anyways, the really telling moment was when, based on his study, it was determined that we still need that baseline legal education. We need those core competencies that AI can't necessarily teach, but it can enhance. And so we need to start from actually learning the way we did in the old days. And then, as you say, with experience and with practice comes the ability to really embrace technology properly and to embrace AI in a way where, you'll get an output. And well, first of all, it's based on the inputs. You have to put in, a meaningful prompt. And it's not like in the old days where it was coded and it had to be fancy. It's very, very basic in the sense that you're breaking down what it is you want AI to do. And when you get your output, that's where our magic comes into play, because we're looking at it and we're saying, yes, that is right. And let me embellish and make it better by enhancing it with AI.
And Professor Schwartz's part of his discussion was about exactly what you're saying, and the idea that he conducted a study, came in with a hypothesis, a methodology, and some conclusions. And just at a high level, he and his colleagues at the University of Minnesota Law School looked at an empirical case study to decipher the AI's impact on law student cognitive development. And that's obviously a really foundational piece of the concerns about AI is that are we creating a bunch of young lawyers or young students that aren't really going to have the same level of cognitive development? And they broke down, and they had a bunch of second year and third year students, and they broke it down, and it was really helpful, I thought, because they made them look at it in a 4-stage process. The synthesis stage, which was review and summarize a closed set of legal materials. Okay, so then they were given a comprehension stage, which was answer objective questions. And these are all what we did when we went to law school. Then they went application stage, which was apply the rules, and then finally a revision stage, and that is improve their legal memo writing. And their initial hypothesis I thought was fascinating. They said the researchers hypothesized that AI would impair cognitive engagement at the initial stage, and participants who relied on AI would develop a weaker internal understanding of legal rules and that would result in a poorer performance when applying the law without AI assistance. So that's just summarized exactly what we all live in fear of what the dangers of AI for law students are. And they came in with that as their hypothesis.
Right. And it was really neat when it comes down to the actual findings. Firstly, the findings directly contradicted that hypothesis. So participants who used AI in the synthesis stage, that first stage that you mentioned, performed better in the application stage, even after AI access was removed. And so this was attributable, they said, that to a much stronger initial comprehension of the legal materials, which carried forward into the subsequent analysis. And that comes back to what I was saying. You've got to understand the core principles before you can apply them and before you can do even more with that kind of understanding. And it was interesting because what they had done is they broke the students down into two different groups. One used AI for some of these stages and one did not. And, that was how they got their empirical data. And it was very interesting that I thought that I was surprised, to say the least.
Yeah, and some of the surprise benefits were that high quality legal drafters actually diminished their skills, and low quality legal drafters enhanced their skills using the tools. And I think that's sort of a neat point. Like people talk about, and then we've had Doug Higgins from CNSL-ai on our podcast in the past, and he talks about this idea that what you do is you have a moat, and that moat is the distance between your competitor and you in terms of, or the user and you. So the consumer who doesn't have the legal knowledge, the moat is the legal knowledge base that the consumer can't climb over. And the great equalizer is AI, because of course the consumer now, like the doctors have been suffering through for years with medical testing of their own medical abilities through the internet. The consumer now is shrinking that moat, and that moat is shrinking also with legal writing. And that the really good legal writers might be actually, it sounds like, dumbing down their work product through the use of AI tools, and the ones that aren't strong are bringing it up. So it's changing the methodology that you have to be a great writer to be a great lawyer.
Right.
And so that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds.
But that point, though, Ian, is that very counterintuitive to me, that, it would make you a lesser of a good writer if you rely too much on AI. But there was some qualification on that. It really was that, fatigue and timeliness, or concern over lack of timeliness, were big problems for that. And so people who were naturally good writers, who are tired or under very tight time constraints, suddenly became overly reliant on AI, thinking it was better than they could be because they're exhausted and they've got a tight deadline. So when you think it through in terms of how they actually got that data and how it was that it came about, then it makes a lot more sense.
Oh yeah, and I think, look, the truth is, at the end of the day, good writers are going to be good writers and they will prevail. People that are not strong writers are catching up to them with the use of the tool. And that's really where it's going, I think, in that sense. But it's just, again, as you and I are trying to run law firms, we're working with students and lawyers and young lawyers, and everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes the writing weakness is a problem. And so I look at this tool as something that I can enhance that particular lawyer on in respect of using it. The other thing that they talked about were the benefits and some of the benefits of the tools. And on the benefit side, they concluded was that AI clearly may enhance one's substantive understanding of the law. So what tells me is that they're getting to the legal answer faster. And that's not such a bad thing, because when I'm thinking about strategy and moving a file forward, I already have, because I've been doing this for 35 years, a deeper understanding of the law than a first-year lawyer. And so I'm crafting my next steps with that in mind, knowing that, geez, a motion for summary judgment always sounds great. The cases always are fun to see, but they're very expensive and they may not be such a practical way to proceed. Well, the idea that you've got your substantive learning brought up faster into your process allows you to develop your skills, the advisor skills, the writing skills, all of those maybe softer skills. So I think that was a great point that came out of the study for sure. All right. Well, look, I mean, I think the last part that Professor Schwartz gave us, and as this particular study is so strong, but this podcast is so great for us, is they always try to come up with some practical guidance and some emerging practices, best practices. So maybe we can discuss a little bit of that, and then we're going to talk about another great resource we've been working with.
For sure. One of the first guidelines that was set out in the podcast was that we want to use AI for specific tasks. We want to break down our work into smaller, manageable components and avoid using it on a high level, broad multi-reasoning fashion, at least for now. I know we're getting there with agentic AI and all these other tools that are coming down the pipelines, but right now AI is strongest when you break down the particular task and you use your legal reasoning and your legal questioning and your hypotheses to flush out the actual input in terms of what it is you want the answer to be or how it's to come out for you to be able to use it in the best fashion.
And I think that's so good from a standpoint of maintaining your substantive knowledge and building all of that. If you break it down into tasks, then you're not really getting to solutions that you haven't really thought through, or you don't really understand how you got to it. So what a great point. The other thing is, and this is where you, as the managing partner of our firm, are constantly working on, is that building active oversight.
Mhm.
And that is, again, verifying the outputs is one thing and the sources, but the other part of it is that how are we dealing with our younger lawyers in using the AI tools? And are we meaningfully mentoring that review and that analysis as senior lawyers? Or are we just getting lazy ourselves? Are we letting the verification of the sources fall by the wayside?
And that's a really good point, Ian, because the output from AI is really good quality. It looks nice and shiny, and sometimes it's right bang on, and sometimes it's not. And I think we are obliged as people who are overseeing our younger lawyers who don't know yet at this point whether something is necessarily right or wrong or somewhere on the spectrum, to make sure that we're doing that check ourselves, because we don't want to get lazy and we don't want our reputations to get sullied by over-reliance on technology.
So you talked about a minute ago this idea of sort of high risk contexts. Can you talk a little bit about one of the guidances that they developed in their study?
Yeah, I mean, the idea really is that you don't want to be in a situation where you're desperate and you turn to AI to get you that answer as quick as possible when you just won't necessarily know if it's right or not. And yes, I understand time pressures and I understand lack of knowledge. We all face that on a daily basis, but you really want to be measured in the way that you use it and not over reliant on it. And when you don't know and you're not sure, ask someone. I mean, that's the benefit of our profession. We're very collegial. There's always an opportunity to say, hey, does this sound right to you? Or am I looking in the wrong place? Or should I be looking at something else? I think really testing the output and relying on our resources is the best way to make sure we're right.
And that comes to that whole idea of prioritizing skill development, not letting AI drive all of that development. And way we've been managing that internally is insisting on a deep mentorship program. So that we can, as you say, get a second look at something, allow that an associate doesn't have the concerns that they can't check their work against with a more senior mentor. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean AI can't say maybe someday do this, but right now it just can't beat that one-on-one, hey, can I just bug you for a minute on this question? So that prioritizing skill development is key. And then the last is that they talked about was continuous reassessment. So, we're seeing developments in AI on a daily/weekly basis. And you and I are geeking out on AI a bit for sure, but allowing yourself to stay competent and to current on the developments is a really important thing. We always have an ethical obligation to do this, but I look at things like opportunities to listen to these kinds of podcasts. AI in the Future Law is another great one where you're going to see recent developments and see where they might be able to, well, first of all, where they're going, but most importantly to me is what can I do with that knowledge? And that's what Professor Schwartz's study really did, was it gave us an opportunity to rethink some of the AI-driven leadership, the AI change management that we're trying to bring into our firm. And part of that rethinking was precisely what he's taught us in that podcast. So
Yeah.
kudos to him, and then kudos to all of his hard work with his team. We've got a few minutes now. We just want to turn to, we're big fans of talking about the resources that are available, because and hopefully summarizing them in our own perspective. We may not have perfectly summarized Professor Schwartz's work,
We definitely didn't.
but with for sure. But we are at least trying to highlight some of the where we saw were some really good nuggets. And one of the things that we recently have been very sort of focused on is resources to help us with the change management. And Suzana, maybe you want to talk about a book that you introduced to me, and one that might be something that we can, I think we've got lots to talk about that's come out of it, but maybe you could tell us a little bit overview about the book itself.
Yeah. Well, I stumbled upon a book called The AI-Driven Leader by Geoff Woods. And I just thought it was just unbelievable. It just really resonated with me. And so much so that I sent a link to everyone in our firm and said, you've got to listen to this. I realize that everyone's going to use AI differently, and not two people are ever going to use it in the same fashion. But this book just has so many nuggets and so many opportunities for people to consider how they can adopt AI regularly. Not just on the one-offs, or I'm stuck, I need to go see if I can get an answer from AI. It really is like bringing it into the way that you run your life on every level. And from my perspective, how you run a firm, by being someone who's adopting AI and being a leader and trying to get that buy-in by everyone else who's around me.
Well, and Geoff Woods is so good at highlighting some of the change leadership moves that we all have to be considering. And one of them I was struck by is what you just said, is that idea that the leadership has to be the user, and it has to be the trumpeter of the products, because you can't sit across the table with a student or a young lawyer and say, look, I want you to use this tool and this tool, unless you've used that tool and seen it. That's so foundational in mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, the more you think about the change management with AI, the more you realize that it really isn't change management. It's just adopting new principles on an old system. And that was, personal attention with your young lawyers, mentorship, and not losing that direct contact, one-on-ones,
shadowing,
and supervision, and all the things that you have there. That really are important. And so we've got a few minutes just to talk a little bit about the book, because as you said, but I also agree, I read it, and it was interesting. Your point was to listen to it. We didn't really, we're lawyers and we read all day. And so sometimes it's a lot to ask a lawyer to say, go read another book. So like you said, you sent around a note and said, look, on me, the audiobook's yours, buy it if you want to use it. And so it was an innovative way of sort of saying to lawyers, hey, look, if you're coming in on your commute or whatever, you want to listen to it, that's another way to ingest the knowledge.
Yeah.
But so the book opens with the classic, and it's one of those business strategies that gets thrown back at poor Blockbuster every time. But the Blockbuster versus Netflix tale, and he opens up with that. And in some ways, it's easy to say, Blockbuster missed the boat, and obviously Netflix has won the boat, so to speak. But he went into some interesting analysis about ignoring consumer preferences, ignoring innovation, all of the things that we're seeing our clients starting to push back on us on. And that is, there is an expectation that you can't be wastefully doing menial tasks without these AI tools, because they're doing it and they know that they're saving time and money. And then secondly, new innovation. And I guess the key takeaway for him, and we'll talk through this because it really developed well in the book, is that strategic decisions are what it's all about. And it is sink or swim. It's growing. The AI-driven leader has to grow into a strategic thinker. And Wood talks about what that strategic thinker is and what that means.
And also how AI can enhance that thinking, which really is, I think the key, in the sense that we're all very, very busy individuals. And finding the time, the luxury of time to say, oh, okay, now I want to sit down and think about some leadership moments and leadership initiatives for the firm, can fall by the wayside when you've got angry clients and you've got deadlines and you've got all kinds of family commitments that you have to deal with. And so what the books resonated with me was the fact that it was saying, we're going to use AI to help enhance that, to free up some time so that you can have these kinds of considerations, because they are so crucial to our future as a profession.
That's right. And so letting time sort of subsume our strategic thinking and avoiding strategic thinking as a consequence of other priorities is what AI can help us avoid. And he defines, as lawyers, we love definitions. He defines strategic thinking as the process of defining your strategy, then aligning your actions to achieve your most ambitious goals. And he says that this is the critical skill. This critical skill is the backbone of effective leadership, and the difference between becoming a visionary leader or a mere manager. And why this book really resonated with me is because it is all about change management and how we can be effective visionary leaders and not just managers. Managing AI, in my view, is a mistake. It is managing the change management and developing a strategic path to that. And what he talks about, and we'll get into it in more detail, is that you can harness AI as your strategic thought partner. And so this is what he calls a new category of leadership. And so it's not just about putting time in your calendar to think strategically. It's putting time in your calendar to set aside to create strategic decision-making. But he breaks down how the strategic-driven thinking can occur, and you've picked up on one of his ideas with regard to a signage on the computer. Maybe you can talk about that.
Oh, yeah, I really liked that one. The idea was that you have a little sticky and you just put it beside your computer, and it says not how can I do this? How can AI help me do this? And just focusing on how can AI help me do this is a change in thinking, right?
Yes.
So it's a shift, a way, as opposed to it's all about me and I have to figure it out on my own, to how can I use technology to make me come up with the right answer. And I just thought that was really powerful.
Well, it's fun because the idea is that, and we're in the process of ordering them, it's going to say, how can AI help me solve this problem? And we're going to put it on people's computers. So literally, it's going to be top of mind. And to a busy lawyer, that sounds like a great idea, right? All right. Well, look, we're going to have lots more time to talk about this book and talk about some of the change management tools that come out of it, especially in the next podcast. We'll talk about some of the strategic problems that AI can solve immediately, midterm and short term, and then develop more of what he's really helping inform us on. As I say, it's a great book. It's one of those I would say must listen to, must reads. It's and worth doing. It's called The AI-Driven Leader by Geoff Woods, and we'll no doubt keep learning from him and others and keep talking about it in our next podcast. So, Suzana, thanks so much for today.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. And thank you to all of our listeners and watchers. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks.
You have been listening to A Better Place to Be, AI and the Law, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull & Hull LLP, brought to you by Counsel.ai. If you have any questions or comments, please email our office at info@cnsl.ai. Thank you.